Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So first off, let's just get this out of the way. Yes, this is another monk video. And if you want to leave a nasty comment that you can't believe I'm doing another monk video, fair enough. I wasn't planning to do another monk video, but I got an email on the weekend from Patreon telling me that one of my favorite creators had created a monk fix, and I immediately went and checked it out, of course. And what inspired me to make a video is that a lot of the things in this document are just original and creative ideas. And if we're talking about fixing the monk, usually what we see is, you go through the features and then you look for all the ones that you think aren't good enough and then you give them all a little boost. So, you go to hit dice and you see a D8 and you go, they're going to be in melee. They should probably have a D10, so you switch it to a D10, and you kind of go through like that. But I've done that, and I've presented fixes on this channel, and I've never been fully satisfied with the results because there's some things I think just don't work. Like key, for example. I've never figured out how to make key work. I mean, everything feeds off key, and it's equal to your level, how many points you get, and you don't get it back until you complete a short rest. And of course, table to table, the number of short rests you get can change. And it just, I don't know, it just does not work in my opinion. And so I've always thought about how I would change key, never came up with anything good. Well, I found something good. All right, so first I want to talk about the creator himself, and that is ThinkDM. So I've followed ThinkDM for years now. And in fact, when I created my Patreon in order to, get patrons for my own channel, I actually followed ThinkDM as a patron. He was the very first creator I followed. So here's what I really like about ThinkDM. I watch or consume content from people who do rules analysis or optimization content. And normally what I find is I'll see things and either it's something that I've heard before or seen before, or it's something I've covered myself, often several times, and then I'll have it told back to me. I'll consume it anyways because a lot of these creators are friends of mine. But in the case of ThinkDM, this is rules analysis that is very seldom stuff that I've seen before. It is usually original content, and that is actually surprisingly rare in this circle that I'm in. So I'm going to plug his Patreon page right now. So I'm a top level patron for ThinkDM, have been for years now, and I would recommend his page to anyone. I will be going over his monk fix, and I want to mention that if you go to his Patreon page, you actually don't have to join. You can get a PDF of this fix. If you aren't a member, it will be watermarked. But if you go to my video description, you'll see a link to his page, so you can go ahead and download that watermark version if you want to follow along in your own document. So this isn't scripted, but I'm just going to kind of go over what he's done here. And I will say that overall, I think this is a good starting point. I think there's some stuff that needs some changes or some tweaking or play testing, because there's a lot of things that are outside the box in thinking here that I'm not sure how they would affect the table. And there's some stuff I think just doesn't quite work. And I will go over all of that. So it is a 3-page document. It doesn't cover any subclasses. So the subclasses essentially are all the same, except they will function differently because of how he has changed key. This fix actually will interact with all the subclasses, and I will talk about that as well, because I do think that also probably creates some issues. So first, let's talk about the stuff that's the same. So hit points don't change, which is a surprise. Usually I see them move to D10, but they're still D8. Proficiencies don't change. Equipment doesn't change. Then I'm going to just slide down here to the 3rd page. Unarmored defense, so our wisdom bonus to our armor class when we're not wearing armor. Unarmored movement progresses at the same rate. The monistic tradition, that's just our subclass. We get that as normal. Ability score increases at the same points. Key empowered strike, that's our magical attacks at level 6. Evasion, so that's unchanged at level 7. Feather steps, so this is just the part of the movement boost where you can run across walls or across water. They got this already, it just wasn't named, it was just included in unarmored movement. So ThinkDM has just separated it out so that you can see it as a feature. Purity of body at level 10, that's immune to disease and poison, that's normal. Tongue of the sun and moon isn't changed. Diamond Soul, this is the big one, proficiency in all saving throws at level 14. There is one minor change here. The part for re-rolling a failed saving throw is now put under reactions and cost key. Timeless Body didn't change. The capstone changed. So the capstone for the original monk is awful. So what it does is when you roll for initiative and have no key points remaining, you regain 4 key points. That is not a good feature. But here we have you regenerate all key points at the end of your turn. So that is obviously much, much better. It's not quite as crazy as it sounds, though, because of the changes that have been made to key, which we're going to be going over in a bit. And as far as multiclassing goes, we'll come back to that. So let's go back up to the top of the document and talk about some of the things that have changed. All right, so key is the big change here. Key is a vital life force flowing through you, blah, blah, blah. This energy is represented by a number of key points. You have a pool of key points equal to your proficiency bonus plus your wisdom modifier. So no longer is key equal to your level, and no longer do you have to wait till level 2 to get it. We're going to get it at level 1, and we're going to get proficiency bonus, which would be 2 at that point, plus your wisdom modifier. That could be different amounts, but let's say we got, say, a 16 wisdom, so we have 3 as our wisdom modifier. That would be 5 key points at level 1. Use these points to power your monk techniques, actions, bonus actions, and reactions. The key cost of a feature is listed in parentheses after its name. You cannot use features with a key cost greater than your monk level, so there is a restriction on what you can spend your key on. And this is the big thing. At the end of your turn, you regenerate key equal to your proficiency bonus. So you're not getting all your key back every turn, but you would get amount equal to your proficiency bonus every turn, so that gives you a key pool you can spend every single turn. So that would start at 2 points at level 1, and once we get to high level, it would eventually be 6 points every turn that you could spend, and you could do so indefinitely. And then you kind of have a separate pool. That's your wisdom modifier, and if you spend that, then you wouldn't get that back until the end of the combat. Now, I did actually ask ThinkDM about what happens outside of combat, because technically you don't have turns outside of combat, but the idea is that once combat's over, you regenerate up to full key. One thing that didn't change about key is it's still based on your wisdom modifier when you're looking for DCs for the effects you can do. So let's talk about something else that's pretty interesting here, and that is techniques. So techniques only cost key. They do not require an action, bonus action, or reaction. You can use a technique multiple times. You can use multiple techniques together, and Flurry of Blows is a technique, which means that we can do attacks through Flurry of Blows, and we're not using up our bonus action anymore. When you make an unarmed attack on your turn, you can make additional unarmed attacks. You can add an additional number of attacks equal to your proficiency bonus. Each additional attack you add costs 1 more key. Okay, so I have a few things to say about this ability, or a few observations about this ability. However, because of the way it interacts with some rules that we're going to cover later on, I need to come back to it. But there are a few things I want to mention right now. So the first is, this is not a bonus action. So usually Flurry of Blows requires your bonus action. Techniques do not require your bonus action. This is essentially a free action as long as you pay the key for it. The second thing I want to mention is this monk does not get bonus action attacks. So not only is Flurry of Blows not a bonus action, but there's no martial arts bonus action attack with this monk. There's no extra attack at all, in fact, with this monk. Even at level 5, this monk doesn't get extra attack. So if we want to make more than 1 attack on our turn, Flurry of Blows is the way we can do that. And the last thing I want to mention is the pricing, or the cost of this, because I read it wrong. In fact, this is a re-recording because I had read it wrong, and I had to clarify with ThinkDM to find out that I had indeed read it wrong. So it says each additional attack you add costs 1 more key. So I'm like, oh, well, so it costs 1 key. And if you add 1 more attack, now it costs 2 key. And if you add 1 more attack, then it costs 3 key. But that was an incorrect reading. So I'm re-recording now, because the way this works is each additional attack costs 1 more key than the one before it. So if you make 1 attack, it costs you 1 key. If you make 2 attacks with Flurry of Blows, it costs you 2 additional key. So now it's 3 key. And if you make 3 attacks with Flurry of Blows, now it is going to cost 3 additional key. So it becomes 6 key total to make 3 additional attacks. So that is the way it's supposed to work. And like I said, we need to come back to this. Now, I noticed a potential loophole here because it says you can use a technique multiple times. So what you could do, like at level 1, is you could spend a key point on Flurry of Blows, and then you could do Flurry of Blows again, right? And spend one more key point. So I pointed out this loophole to ThinkDM, and he pointed out that obviously, if somebody reads it that way, they know it's not the way it's intended to work, and they're finding a cheesy way to get around it. And he's right. So obviously, the way this is intended is if you're going to make 2 attacks, it's going to cost you 3 key. There's no way around it. The second one is focused aim. I like this one here. This is a change to an existing feature. So let's look at the existing feature. This is an optional class feature from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, focused aim. So here it is right here. When you miss with an attack roll, you can spend 1 to 3 key points to increase your attack roll by 2 for each of these key points you spend, potentially turning the miss into a hit. This usually requires a lot of guesswork on the part of the player. They have to decide how much key points they're going to spend, and then you do the math. And here, this is just much more elegant. Focused aim now costs 2 key points. When you miss with an attack, you can increase your attack roll by your proficiency bonus, potentially turning the miss into a hit. So I think that's a more elegant way to do that feature. Just makes it simpler, easier to use, and still very effective. So yeah, there's 2 techniques, not actions or bonus actions or reactions. Let's talk about the actions we can take. So first off, there's balance. This costs 0 key. You roll a martial arts die, you regenerate key equal to the result. Now, as I mentioned, outside of combat, we're going to get back up to full key right away. So we don't need this outside of combat. So this would be only something we would ever do in combat, and we would only ever do it if we dip into that wisdom pool of key points. I probably wouldn't do it, to be honest. I'm going to spend those extra key. I'm obviously really pushing it. I don't see sitting back and doing nothing for an action the following round, but I appreciate it being here. Second one is Quiet Mind. So this you wouldn't be able to do to level 2, and it's 2 key points. You end 1 effect on yourself that is causing you to be charmed or frightened. And this is basically the Stillness of Mind feature, right? So Stillness of Mind, you can use your action to end 1 effect on yourself that's causing you to be charmed or frightened. So in this case, it's now costing us 2 key, but on the other hand, we can do it at level 2. Now, I have some issues with Stillness of Mind in that you have to use your action, because what if you can't choose what to do with your action? Because that can happen if you're charmed or frightened, and then you can't use Stillness of Mind. And this actually doesn't solve that problem. Third action, so this is at 3rd level, is Quickened Healing. Invigorate yourself by harnessing your adrenaline in combat. Roll a martial arts die, you regain hit points equal to the number rolled, plus your proficiency bonus. So this could be interpreted 2 ways. This could be interpreted that this can only be done in combat, because it does say in combat. If so, it gives you a healing option in combat. Costs you 3 key points, available at level 3. And if you don't determine it needs to be done in combat, then it means you can heal to full at the end of every combat, because you're going to regenerate all your key outside of combat, so you can just do Quicken Healing over and over again, and no matter how damaged you were, you can get back up to full. How big a problem that is, I don't think it's as big a problem as a lot of players do when those kinds of things come up. And ThinkDM says he's not sure whether he figures you should be able to do it outside of combat or not. So yeah, you would have to kind of play around with it, or just play to your preference. So next up is Stunning Strike. So this one was a bit surprising because Stunning Strike actually is probably worse than it was before. So Stunning Strike is 4 key points, can be done at level 4, so technically earlier. You can make an unarmed attack. Now this is an action. So you're doing 1 action to do Stunning Strike, and you can only do 1 Stunning Strike on your turn. Unless you have some feature like Action Surge or something, you just can't apply Stunning Strike to other attacks. So if you do Flurry of Blows, those attacks won't be Stunning Strikes. But your main action, you could Stunning Strike, you could get the unarmed attack. If you hit, the target cannot take reactions until the end of their next turn. If this looks familiar to you, this was a feature on my Monk variant that I did, I don't know, a year and a half ago. So if you remember that, it had this same feature. I think DM saw that and liked that part, so he borrowed that for this fix. They must also make a Constitution saving throw or become stunned until the end of their next turn. So we've shortened the duration because Stunning Strike normally lasts till the end of your next turn. So we're stunning them. We can only do it once and shorter duration. And this is costing 4 ki to do as well. This is not cheap. The only advantage of this is the potential to remove reactions if they make their save but are still hit with the attack. So Stunning Strike is a lot worse. So why was Stunning Strike made worse? Well, the reason was, and this is actually a good point, is ThinkDM said that if somebody's playing a monk, usually what happens is they have this pool of ki, they have all these features that require ki, and they don't use 95% of them. And the reason they don't use it is because they're saving their ki for Stunning Strikes. And then they spend all their ki on Stunning Strikes because it's the best thing a monk can do, and all this other stuff just never gets done. By making Stunning Strike worse, you make it so that a monk player is now going to look at these other options and maybe do them instead. And that was a good point. I mean, I didn't think about it that way before, but it's true. If you make Stunning Strike worse as a monk player, you still might Stunning Strike, but you might spend your ki on many, many other things. Then at 5th level, we've got 5-finger Death Strike. All right, so this costs 5 ki. You'd be able to do it 5th level. Make 5 unarmed attack rolls against a target. So these are not attacks, so you're not doing any damage here. You cannot apply advantage or reroll these rolls. If they all hit, the target is incapacitated, then dies the next time they move. If any attack misses, this has no effect. So you have to hit all 5 times or nothing happens, and this uses your action. This is obviously the 5-point palm exploding heart technique from Kill Bill, which is cool, right? I love that movie. So that's essentially what this is doing. The problem is, I think this is a trap. I would never do this. And I don't think I would recommend anyone ever do it, even in dire circumstances. Your chance of success of hitting 5 times in a row without advantage is extremely poor. Let's just calculate this for a second. So let's say we have a 60% chance to hit. All right, so hitting once, 60% chance. Hitting a second time in a row, 36% chance. Hitting a third time in a row, now we're down to 21. Hitting a fourth time in a row, that's now down to 13. And hitting a 5th time in a row, 7%. So 93% of the time, you just do nothing. You have wasted your turn. Now, the stakes are high. I mean, you're talking about automatic death, but 93% chance nothing happens. That is a lower chance of success than the Cleric's Divine Intervention. Now, I asked ThinkDM because Focused Aim, technically speaking, shouldn't work with this because it says when you miss with an attack, and these aren't attacks, they're just attack rolls. And he said that originally this said when you miss with an attack roll, so that originally it would work, and then once he edited it, it wouldn't work anymore. And he doesn't remember whether he did that intentionally or not. So what he said is he would probably just run this as is, and if people aren't using it, then allow Focused Aim to work with it. I gotta say, even with Focused Aim, I probably wouldn't use this. It's just too low a chance of working. But you know what? It's not my personal taste to have these things where either nothing happens or something absolutely insane happens. That isn't my personal play style, so other people might enjoy this more than I would. Then we have Paralytic Punch. So this is basically like an alternative to Stunning Strike. This would not be available to level 6. You make an unarmed attack. If you hit, the target must make a Constitution saving throw or become paralyzed. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turn or when they take damage. So in a lot of ways, this is better than Stunning Strike. In one way, it is worse. Still a Constitution saving throw. But the nice thing here is there is no duration to this. So in theory, something could be paralyzed forever with a Paralytic Punch. I mean, in practice, that would basically never happen. You're always going to have at least a chance of success, unless you're like a 20th level monk with a wisdom score. Maybe you got it over 20 and you somehow got your DC like over 20 and then something doesn't have a bonus. But I did find it a little shocking to see, because usually with these kinds of features there's a cap, right? So it would say paralyzed for a minute or ends early if you make your saving throw, right? But This doesn't actually include that language. You could add it if you wanted to. I don't think in practice it would make any difference. The one way this is worse than Stunning Strike is they get a saving throw if they take damage. So basically, you would do the paralytic punch, and then you'd probably move on to different targets. So in most ways, I'd say it's significantly better than Stunning Strike, but there is that one downside. And in order to get 6 ki back at the end of your turn, you would have to be 17th level or higher. So you're definitely dipping into your wisdom ki for this, meaning that the next turn you wouldn't get it all back, again, unless you're super high level. Then for 9 ki, we have Dissipate. You can cast Etherealness. The duration is 1 minute instead of 8 hours. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you complete a long rest. So this is the first feature we see that's limited in number of uses. 1 use per long rest, cast Etherealness. To do 9, you could technically achieve that at 9th level because you'd have proficiency bonus plus 4. So if you had a 20 wisdom, you'd be able to do this at 9th level. Otherwise, you'd have to wait till higher level. And then Mystic Journey. This costs 10 ki. You cast Astral Projection. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you complete a long rest. This is something a monk from the Player's Handbook can do at 18th level. And here, in theory, you could do it at 10th level, but in practice, you won't be able to. Because at 10th level, you're going to have a 4 proficiency bonus, and I would assume you will not have more than a plus 5 wisdom modifier, meaning you would not have 10 ki to spend. However, in theory, you could, because you can, technically speaking, have wisdom over 20. You can get up to 30 in wisdom. So in theory, you could cast it at 10th level. One way or the other, I wouldn't worry about it. Astral Projection is a 9th level spell, but it's one of those spells that it's only as good as the DM makes it. In most campaigns, Astral Projection is never going to come into play. You basically use it to travel the astral plane. So if that's part of your campaign, then it's vital. And if it's not, you're not going to have any use for it. I mean, you can technically use it to travel between planes, but again, that depends on your DM because you need to find a portal to the other plane through the astral plane. And it's up to your DM to determine where those portals are or if you're able to find them. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about this at all. Getting it early isn't a problem. But here's something that is a problem, the bonus actions. So this just doesn't work. On your turn, you can take the following bonus actions: Patient Defense, 1 point, Dodge, Step of the Wind, 1 point, Dash, Elusive Maneuvers, 1 point, Disengage, Empty Body, 4 points, you become invisible, and you gain resistance to all damage but force damage until the start of your next turn. Alright, so at level 1, if I made this monk, they would use Patient Defense every turn. So I do 1 point on Flurry of Blows and 1 point on Patient Defense. So I'm attacking twice and I'm dodging. And I'm dodging every round, and that's broken. It's too good. You shouldn't be able to dodge every round and still get your multiple attacks. Normally, a monk just can't do this because they can't afford to do it. Never mind the fact how much they're giving up by using their bonus action. But now, of course, our extra attacks aren't using our bonus action anymore. So we can do this, and there's really no penalty. It means, oh no, I can't dash this turn. And yeah, so we're just going to dodge every turn. And at level 1, it's using half our pool that we get back every round. And then at level 5, it'll be a third of our pool, and so on. So it becomes cheaper and cheaper. And yeah, this is a problem. You can't have Patient Defense cost 1 ki with this particular fix, because the way ki works, this is too good now. So I'm not sure whether it should just be a higher ki cost or whether it should be removed entirely. Not sure. But as it is, it's broken because it becomes something that you're just going to do every turn, and dodging every turn is insane, right? That's disadvantage on all attacks against you forever. So yeah, that's too good. Now we should talk about Empty Body because this is a new feature. You become invisible and you gain resistance to all damage but force damage until the start of your next turn as a bonus action. So we could potentially do this at level 4, though it would eat up basically all our wisdom-based ki as well, so we wouldn't be able to do it 2 rounds in a row. But we could potentially do it as early as level 4. By level 9, if it's all you spent your ki on, you could do it every round. And it would give disadvantage to attacks against you, advantage on attacks because you'd be invisible, and you get resistance when you do take damage. I'm not sure that I'd be spending 4 ki on Empty Body when Patient Defense is there for 1 ki. Now, Empty Body gives an offensive component and patient defense doesn't. But in terms of defense, it's not significantly better. It does give you resistance to all the damage, and patient defense doesn't. But patient defense is going to allow you to avoid a lot of damage, because all attacks against you are with disadvantage, just like with empty body. Plus, you get that bonus on the dexterity saving throws, and we have evasion as well. So that works really well with evasion. Somebody throws a fireball at you, chances are you take 0 damage. You won't need resistance. All right, let's move on to the reactions we can do. Deflect missile really only has one major change, and I like this change. So previously, when you use deflect missile, what you do is you roll a die, add your dexterity modifier and your monk level, and then you reduce the damage taken by the missile. Now, you use your reaction and the missile is deflected. No roll, it just happens. It's just simpler, and I mean, honestly, is that a big problem? I don't think so. So yeah, deflect missile now just deflects the missile. You can still spam the key point and return fire with it. Then we have Get Down, Mr. President. Negate the damage of one ranged weapon attack against an adjacent ally. You may declare that you're going prone. If you do so, the ally may choose to go prone. I think that's a neat idea, and why not? Why not have monks be able to deflect missiles heading at the guy right beside them? I mean, it just kind of makes sense. So I like this feature almost entirely. The only thing I don't like is the name. Get Down, Mr. President. I don't know. It just doesn't inspire fantasy in my head. So I would probably rename it, but I like the feature. Deflect Raise. So this is 3 key. You can deflect a ranged spell attack against you. Make an attack roll contesting the ranged spell attack. If your attack roll is equal or greater than the result of the ranged spell attack, you deflect the attack and take no damage. If you roll a 20, you can reflect the spell effect back at the caster. If you roll a 1, the spell attack strikes the nearest ally within your line of sight. Now, there aren't a whole lot of like big stakes spells that require an attack roll. However, like I just went through Monsters of the Multiverse, and there's lots of creatures now that make ranged spell attacks as an action, and a lot of them are pretty big stakes. Deflect Ray would be great against those. And I noticed this doesn't limit to spells, it's just ranged spell attacks. The one thing I don't like here, frankly, personally get rid of it if I was ever to use this, is if you roll a 1, the spell attack strikes the nearest ally within your line of sight. This stinks of critical fumbles. I don't like critical fumbles. You know, keep the 20, the reflecting back, that's cool. But if you roll a 1, then you've missed the contest, so you're going to get hit anyway. That's enough. Tranquility, 3 points. Reroll a failed saving throw. So this used to be part of Diamond Soul, but now it's separate, and it will cost key, 3 key. Combat roll, 2 key. When an enemy moves at least 20 feet towards you and makes a melee attack roll, you can roll 5 feet out of the way. This movement does not provoke opportunity attacks. And I just wanted to verify with ThinkDM. I'm like, so does this mean the attack that triggered this is going to miss? And he said, yes, that is what he meant by out of the way. So you basically use a reaction, attack misses, and now you've moved away. And then slow fall is basically the same, except it costs 1 key now. And I'm not sure why this wasn't made 0, but anyway, it now costs 1 key. Okay, so martial arts. So the first thing I will just repeat, I mentioned this before, we no longer get the bonus action attack. It's gone here. Here's what martial arts does do, though. We're going to get the martial arts die that does scale with our level, and we can use strength or dexterity for attack rolls and damage rolls of our unarmed strikes. The scaling here is faster, so it starts at the same. Going to D6 at level 5 is the same. The D8 at level 9, that's an improvement. It used to be level 11. The D10 at level 13 is a big improvement. That used to occur at level 17. And then that's where the normal monk caps out. Here we're going to get a D12 at level 17, and then we get a D20 at level 20. Now this is unheard of. D20s generally are not used for damage rolls. But yeah, so I think ThinkDM was thinking, it's level 20, what the hell. Now we have an optional rule here for monk weapons. So you'll notice that every feature we've had so far talks about unarmed attacks. None of them mention monk weapons at all. Here's why. So your practice of martial arts gives you mastery of combat styles that use monk weapons. These weapons count as monk weapons. Short sword, dagger, hand axe. We're going to get basically the list we're used to here, except we're going to add a couple different weapons that we normally don't get. And then it says your monk weapons become an extension of you, counting as unarmed attacks for the purpose of your class features. You can use your martial arts die to roll damage for these weapons. So what this means is that all those features that said unarmed attack, we could use monk weapons with. One interesting thing here is that, so let's say we had a dagger. So we have dagger here is one of our monk weapons. So it would count as an unarmed strike. So if we stab somebody with the dagger, works the same as an unarmed strike. Where it becomes different is we could throw the dagger. And if we throw the dagger, it still counts as an unarmed strike. That means if we're looking at something like stunning strike up here, let's just find stunning strike. It says make an unarmed attack if you hit blah, blah, blah. Well, if we threw a dagger at somebody, that would be an unarmed attack. So we could do stunning strike at range. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? In fact, a lot of these features we could do at range that normally we couldn't. Another thing is we could do our flurry of blows at range. Because this also is unarmed attacks, and now a dagger would count as an unarmed attack. There would be a limit because, you throw a dagger, and then you draw a dagger, and you throw another dagger. Well, you don't have another interact with an object to throw a third dagger. And I asked ThinkDM if this is supposed to work around our normal object interaction rules, and he said, nope, they stay the same. So yeah, you would still have the problem that you would run out of daggers, or you wouldn't have the interaction to draw another dagger. However, this has a problem. Okay, this has a big problem. This basically doesn't work. Here's why it doesn't work. So we have two weapons here, dart and sling. Those weapons are both ranged weapons. And yeah, there's normally not ranged weapons with monk weapons, and now there is. And if they count as unarmed strikes, this creates a situation where you would be foolish to ever punch or kick anything ever with this monk. And here's why. So let's say we're playing a variant human. And as a variant human, we took the sharpshooter feat at level 1. So now we're going to grab a sling. And yeah, we're now better than a monk that didn't do this. A lot better. How much better? Well, let's go back up to flurry of blows. Okay, so at level 1, what are we going to do with our ki? We're going to get 2 ki back every turn. What are we going to spend it on? Well, obviously, we're going to spend 1 ki on patient defense. Best thing we can do with a ki point. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to spend 1 more point on flurry of blows. And we're going to attack with our sling twice with sharpshooter. So this is like taking a fighter and giving them sharpshooter, and then giving them extra attack at level 1. Because basically, let's say we have a 16 dexterity, so we're adding 10 from sharpshooter, 3 from dexterity, so we're adding plus 13 damage to 2 attacks. The fact that we're doing a d4 with the base attack is almost irrelevant, because we're adding so much damage to it that you could have a character at level 1, if they hit twice, I mean, they probably won't hit twice because you have that -5, but if they hit twice, they could potentially, well, I mean, they're automatically going to be doing 28 points of damage plus at level 1. This will wipe out creatures that were intended to be a challenge for the entire party. Way more powerful than any other class could be at level 1 in terms of archery. Probably twice as powerful. Now, the second issue is this flurry of blows is not a bonus action. That means if we did get something like crossbow expert and then become a kensai, because subclasses work the same, well, the kensai could take the hand crossbow as a monk weapon. We could get 3 attacks around at level 3. But even without that, basically, if you're going to give a class 2 attacks at level 1, so basically extra attack at level 1, and then they have weapons where they can add sharpshooter or great weapon master, in this case it's sharpshooter, then they're more powerful in combat than any other class in the game. So we have an imbalance here, where at first level, monks are too powerful using these rules. Now, I looked at this and I thought, what happens as we go up in higher levels? Are we still overpowered? Not really after level 5. If we look at what other classes can do with ranged attacks, level 5 plus, this monk is then comparable. I would say that maybe a little bit ahead still at level 5, but it's close. Close enough that it's not really a concern. But then as we get into higher levels, the other classes are going to pull ahead of this monk. But this monk will always do okay. So I would say that you could play this monk from levels 5 through 20, use a sling, and you're going to be comparable to the other classes. You're going to do reasonably good damage, and then you have the other features on top. My issue here is that that is not the case if you want to punch and kick, right? Or do anything that you would expect a traditional monk to do. So you want to use a quarterstaff. Sorry, you're going to suck. In fact, you might even be worse than the Player's Handbook monk, because not only are we reducing stunning strike, but flurry of blows actually ends up being kind of a downgrade, because think about level 5. So if we're playing a Player's Handbook monk, we could attack 3 times a round for free, or we could attack 4 times a round and by using our flurry of blows, and we could do that 5 times in a row. With this character, if we wanted to punch and kick, so we're level 5, we could attack 3 times on our turn. Again, we could do that indefinitely. We wouldn't be able to do anything else, right? That would basically be using up our key. We could flurry blows to get a 4th attack once, and then we're tapped. We got nothing left. So we actually could make less attacks than the Player's Handbook monk. So what this fix ends up doing, and I appreciate that we're doing out of the thought box thinking here. This is what I love about ThinkDM, is that he's taken us into a total different realm here as to how this could work, but I don't think it works. And maybe the key is removing ranged attacks entirely from monk weapons, but you got the issue that the Kensai could add those ranged attacks back in, because their Kensai weapons are treated as monk weapons, and these rules make those monk weapons unarmed attacks. So I'd have to really think about what to do here. And there's the issue that if you took those weapons away, then we have an underpowered monk again. So there's got to be another way to do this. But unfortunately, as this is written, I don't see this working. And then the last part here is the optional rule for multiclassing. And I was not surprised to see this, because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, this is a crazy 1-level dip. Just insane. If we dipped 1 level of monk, what's going to happen is our key pool is already 5-ish, right? And it's going up. Our proficiency bonus goes up. We may raise our wisdom. So our pool of key is not dependent on our actual monk levels at all. So 1 level dip, and what am I doing? Well, I'm dodging every round, right? As a bonus action, I'd dodge every round, of course. And then I'd have additional key that I could spend on other things. I could do a flurry of blows. I could, do a slow fall, deflect missile. So it would just give me a number of things I could do every round, 1 level. So I was curious to see what the limits on multiclassing would be. It says when you take levels in another class, the amount of key you regenerate each turn is capped at your monk level. So let's say we take 1 level of monk, and let's say it's our first level. So we are a monk, and at the end of our turn, we get 2 key back. Then we multiclass into any other class, and now we'd only get 1 key back at the end of our turn. And that is basically unheard of in the game, that you would multiclass out of a class and then lose features from that class. Never seen that before. But it would limit things somewhat. But it's not a fix. Or maybe if we fix flurry blows and dodge, it would be a fix. But if we are including flurry blows as it is and dodge as it is, so let's say I take 2 level dip in monk on my fighter. So I am going to be a 5th level fighter, and I take 2 level dip. Well, then I'm getting dodge every round, and I'm getting an additional attack every round, because flurry blows is an extra attack. Extra attack normally doesn't stack with itself. Flurry blows is a different feature, so it would stack with extra attack. If we took 3 levels, then we could take Kensai, and then so we got our crossbow expert fighter. that at level 8 would be making attacks as if they were 11th level straight fighter, plus the dodge every round. So it still has a problem because some other things on this don't work. But if we could fix flurry blows, if we could find a way to do that, and monk weapons, if we could fix dodge, then this might work. Otherwise, as a 1, 2, or 3 level dip, it's still crazy. And then the second is harnessing your life force requires your entire focus. As such, you cannot use key features while you're concentrating on a spell that you learn from another class. And that would prevent a lot of cheese that you could do. I was thinking of it as I was reading this. Things that like, if I'm multi-classed into, this spellcaster and then we're adding this spell onto this feature, wow, right? Now, the idea of this is you would pick your subclasses normal, and they would all be just basically the published versions, except now we have our key regenerating at the end of our turn. So the way this works does create some problems. So I'm just going to go through a couple examples, but basically what you'd have to do, I think, is if you were to use this version, then you would need to actually plan with your DM, this is the subclass I'm going to take. And then you'd have to look at that subclass and look for things that are broken, because I didn't have to look very hard to see some stuff that's a problem. We have Mercy Monk, very first monk I looked at. Hand of Healing, all right? So if you can do a Hand of Healing an infinite number of times outside of combat, then that means you're healing every party member to full at the end of every fight and no resource cost. So I just think that's too much, right? For yourself, that's one thing. But for everybody in the party, it's too much. That is broken, I think. Then I went to the very next subclass, and we've got Way of Shadow, Shadow Arts. Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without Trace, Silence. Should these be spells we can cast at will? Because that's what would happen. You could cast them all at will. It's probably too much, right? I mean, 2 key points to cast them. You get the 2 key points back at the end of your turn, and the next turn you cast again. Now, a lot of these are concentration, so you wouldn't be able to cast them more than once in a row. Dark Vision isn't. You could just cast Dark Vision on your entire party right away. And of course, what you could do is you could play a Way of Shadow Monk. You could cast Darkness as often as you like. Then you take the Eldritch Adept feat so that you can have Dark Fit or Devil Sight, so you can see 120 feet, including through Magical Darkness. Then we're taking a Sling and using Flurry of Blows with it. And then we have Sharpshooter. And this gets really, really out of control. It was already out of control, but it gets just ridiculous. We get into some crazy stuff with 4 elements. I'll just give you just a really easy example. So we're level 11, and basically then we could cast Fireball at will. Because we have 4 proficiency bonus, so we get 4 key back at the end of our turn. So yeah, we could spend 4 key points to cast Fireball every round. Now, 11th level, Fireball isn't all that impressive, but every round Fireball, that's pretty impressive. So yeah, I think that's too much. And I noticed a few other ones here as well. Also with some of the special features like Fangs of the Fire Snake. With this key regeneration method, I think you got to look at all these features again, and you would have to somehow rebalance it. So there are things here that I love. I love the way key is handled here. I think making Flurry of Blows like a non-action is neat, and it probably needs a little bit of tweaking, but I think this is a great starting point. Focused Aim, I love this change. I wonder if Stunning Strike got hit a little hard here, and maybe make it a little bit better or a little bit cheaper or something. But I appreciate the idea of making it a little weaker so that we look at our other options. I love that we have some additional reactions that are interesting, like negating weapon attacks or ranged attacks against allies, or deflecting spell attacks, or rolling out of the way of a single attack. I mean, we have ways to improve armor class against a single attack within the game, but just outright, whoops, you missed. There are some of those features, but they tend to be incredibly limited in use. This one really isn't, but it is only 1 attack, so I don't think it's broken, and I do think it's really cool. I think scaling the martial arts die faster, it makes all kinds of sense. The D20 at level 20, I don't think I'd go that far. I think I'd probably just leave it at the D12. Now, there are so many things about this that I really, really like. And the thing is I've worked on monk fixes a lot, and other people have too. But I just see things here that are so out of the box, and they deal with some things that I've never found a solution for. Like I've had problems with how to deal with key. I like this way of dealing with key, but if you're going to have key work this way, then you got to look at everything else and how it's going to affect it. And I think it does create some problems, like dodging every round for one key. I think that's a problem. But I think the biggest problem with this monk, the reason I don't think I could run it as written, is because of the monk weapons being treated as unarmed strikes and their interaction with flurry of blows. Creates a monk that is too powerful at level 1, but it's okay at level 5. But we basically force, mechanically, if we're going to optimize at all, we force a monk to use a sling. The sling becomes so much better than punching and kicking that we're essentially killing the punching and kicking monk. And what I would prefer to see is a monk fix where punching and kicking is just okay, right? So that we could have a monk that does punches and kicks and still hits things with its quarterstaff and be mechanically effective doing that, rather than say, well, here's a sling and you're super fantastic at using a sling, so you don't have to punch and kick anymore. I don't think that's the fix. I don't think that was the intention, but that is mechanically, unfortunately, the way it ends up working out. But here is kind of how I want to wrap up, is that, like I said, there's so much out of the box thinking here and interesting ideas here that if I was to work on another monk fix, I think I would use this as a chassis because there's so much here that's interesting. I think with some work, this could work out really well. I just want to take this opportunity and thank ThinkDM for giving me permission to talk about his monk fix. By all means, go visit his Patreon page. There's lots of free content there. Or you can visit his website, which is thinkdm.org, I believe, and all the content there is free. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.